I remember this was my first proper film. I'd done a couple of shorts, and I remember the premiere in London all those years ago, and I was such a young actress. I was so frightened. I remember standing at the back and David Puttnam putting his hand around me and saying, "It's okay." And who would have thought? Yeah. And I just sat there beaming and smiling and laughing and just loving it on the big screen. Doesn't she look great on the big screen? I don't mean me, I mean the film. I refer to a film as she. She just looks great.
Yeah, it was really lovely to see it tonight, so beautifully projected, and the sound. It's funny, you don't often see it, so a movie so perfectly projected. And we had the most wonderful DOP cinematographer, Chris Menges. And it just, he made everything kind of radiate with light. It was just quite extraordinary. It was lovely to see.
Yes, because Chris did Chariots of Fire.
Yes, he did Chariots of Fire as well. Yeah, he's a wonderful DP.
He's a documentary filmmaker.
Yes, yeah.
And so, watching it again, what were the scenes that? Let's ask Jenny first. What were the scenes that most, when you're watching it now, that you kind of remember? Oh, that was that day where that happened. What are the ones that most stick in your memory from the shoot?
Well, on one of the scenes I had to shoot, the sea was so cold, we had to reshoot it because I came out blue. And when we'd finished doing all the sea scenes, and they kept giving me brandy by the side of the rocks to warm me up, which of course is the worst thing you can give someone when they're cold because it dilates the arteries and you just lose heat faster. But they didn't know. Anyway, I didn't say no. I was looking forward to the tank in Oxford. I thought, oh, I'd be a heated tank. That'll be great. It was absolutely freezing. But I do remember there was a scene with Peter, and it's not the scene I remember, but he was talking, and this is Peter because he's got such a great sense of humor. He was describing a morning scene that the two of you, Denis and Peter, had done. And he said, so, it was the morning, and I said to Bill, he said, shall I just do it like this? And there was this pause, and Bill went, no. And that stuck with me. That was Bill Forsyth. That was the way, I'm talking half with a Scottish accent, I sort of picked it up. But that was Bill, the master of gentle understatement.
Well, I want to talk a bit about, well, actually, let's just, what were the moments from the shoot that really stick in your head?
Well, there's so much. I mean, it was probably, I think, I think I could safely say it's my favourite job I've ever done in my career, Local Hero. It's quite remarkable what it did to everyone up there. And we all actually had almost the same experience as the central character. We became pixelated by this extraordinary place. And I'd never been there. As a Scot, I'd never been there. But I remember there's so much. But I remember particularly there were a couple of scenes that were not in the script. And Bill would do this. You'd just be pulled in one day, and he said, the scene where Peter Riegert brings his briefcase to the bedroom door to have it recharged. Now, that wasn't in the script. So we just sat in the car park outside the hotel, improvised it, cut it, and then went up and shot it. And then the little scene later on where we were talking about the music, could you turn this off? What, you've never liked this music? No. Now, that, again, exactly the same. We just improvised that, and then put it together and shot it. And I loved that way of working. It was terrific.
Do you remember Ian Smith, who's the associate producer, a wonderful guy? I think he should have been here tonight, but he's ill. He actually was so organised that they set up a screen in the middle of Scotland, in the middle of nowhere, and we watched the Derby whilst we were shooting. The entire shoot stopped while we watched the Derby happen on television. And at the end of the evenings, because of course it doesn't get dark till about 2 a.m, so you're doing these night shoots, but we'd finish at about 9 o'clock, and we'd go back to the hotel starving and say, is your kitchen open? Oh no, the kitchen shuts at 8. We couldn't even get sandwiches. We had to go to Bill Forsyth. They put Bill in a hotel where he had bagpipes every day before dinner, and their kitchen stayed open. But us meager actors, we were in a hotel where it shut at 7:30, and that was that. But it was great. I loved it, every second of it.
Well, I must just tell you, actually, there's another that reminds me. There was a little night shoot that Peter Riegert and I had to do now I've never had this before, because we were that far north, usually you're fighting the light, it getting dark. But we literally had 3 hours of darkness to get this scene shot. So it was kind of completely the wrong way around, because it really doesn't, at that time in Scotland, that far north, it doesn't really get dark at all. So we just had like 3 hours to get scenes in, and I'd never had that before. It was just extraordinary. It was brilliant.
Let's just talk a little bit about being directed by Bill, because I think so Ian Smith was supposed to be here this evening, and he's just not very well. So he sends his apologies. But he was saying, I guess there was a huge challenge in just capturing the tone of how Bill wanted it to be, because it is, we were talking about this before, it's comedy without jokes. And to find the register of performance correctly is quite difficult. And so literally, what is the sort of directions that Bill will be giving you on set to capture that tone?
It's a really tough one, because it was just literally, don't do anything. It's the film of Po-Face. Everybody's kind of, you say to someone, oh, you look like an elephant today, and they go, oh, okay, thank you. And there's a non-reaction, and that's Bill. That's his sense of humour. It is that, no, and that is the tone of the film, And obviously, Denis's part was much bigger, so he should talk about it. But it was very simple. He hardly directed us, really. He just let us get on with it. But if we did too much, or we did something that wasn't in the tone, he'd just say, no, let's do it again.
Yes, I think he might be surprised to hear this, actually, Bill, but he's probably my favorite director that I've worked with on film, because he doesn't tell you anything, really. He just, and I think this is pretty sort of accidental to do with his personality, but he just creates a fairly relaxed atmosphere around you, and then you feel very free to try stuff. And we do a take, and he'd shout cut, and then I'd go over to him and say, how was that, Bill? Was it all right? Yeah, it was very good. And that was as much as he'd say. And if he said, yeah, it was very good, you knew it was very, very good. He was a king of understatement. And that's actually, as playing his material needed a very throwaway style. In a way, it's nothing like Woody Allen, but it's the way you have gags, but you throw them away. You let the comedy work for itself. And you let the audience find it funny. Yeah, you draw them in that way. Yeah.
And Jenny, you do have one of the great entrances since Dr. No, that kind of first appearance in the town. But also, you're sort of a slightly mystical being in this film, aren't you? She's not an entirely flesh and blood woman.
I do get people still asking me, do you have webbed feet? And I'm not going to answer that. I always saw her as the spirit of Scotland. I think that she is a mystical character, and Bill and I talked about this, and obviously, you can't play that because it's in there, it's around, you don't want to do anything with it, you just want to sort of flick it out there, like everything he does, and just go, okay, here's a thought. And, when she says, no, I don't see that happening here, you kind of go, no, it's not going to actually, is it? Because she's going to make it not happen. That last scene, oh my God. We filmed, he wanted her to just go under and just not come back, so that that she is sort of a mermaid with these extraordinary lungs. And it was very, very cold. And we did about 6 takes, and I never, ever, ever, as an actress, I'll go until I drop. And on that day, I think on my 5th take, by the time I went under the water, I had such a migraine from the cold. I just said, Bill, I'm really sorry. I can't do any more. And that's the only time I've ever said that in my life. But I think we got it, so it didn't matter. But no, she was, I think, the spirit of Bill Forsyth's idea of Scotland. And the film, as you said at the beginning, just resonates so much these days with fracking nowadays, actually. Then talking about making money from fracking all over the place. And is it going to do what that might have done to Scotland? Who knows?
Well, yes, I was going to say, obviously it resonates, and also with the referendum last year as well. It feels as if there's a lot about this film that feels probably more topical now almost than it did in 1983, where I think maybe we were less aware of some of those issues than we are now.
It still feels very afresh as a film, and it's had such a long life. I mean, it's extraordinary, really. But it's that universal theme too of a man, the American character particularly, sort of finding himself in a totally different environment, in a very natural environment, and I think as urban people, we do lose that sense of belonging to the landscape, So, yeah.
Let's talk a bit about Burt Lancaster. So at what point, how did he arrive in the reality of the shoot, and how, because it feels like he needed to have such a presence and such a sort of magnificence in the film. But I mean, what was it like just being in the?
I'm going to be very brief because I've done 2 projects with Burt and I never met him. I met him afterwards because he was a friend of my ex's, and so we had dinner on a few occasions. But filming with him, I didn't have any experience. So, Dennis, over to you.
Well, it was an extraordinary, terrific experience to work with him. I didn't realize until afterwards, when I read, some of you may have read it yourselves, a biography of Lancaster, that I remember in having conversations with him, and I was asking him, pumping about his stuff that he'd done, The Crimson Pirate and things like that, and he was very keen that I knew that he'd produced that work. I produced that. Yeah, I produced that. And I didn't know at the time, of course, but he was one, or probably the most powerful independent producer with his partner Hecht and Lancaster in the 50s and 60s. They were incredibly powerful. And he had a legendary temper. He could be a very, very frightening man. But on this, and I heard him talk about it afterwards, it was the happiest shoot that he'd been on. So he was great to have around. He was just very interesting. I remember he would occasionally, we'd entice him out for a drink in a pub at the end of a day's shoot. And I'd try and stand beside him, And there was one time on the beach, because I was very interested in kind of physical theatre. I'd done quite a lot in tumbling and stuff like that. And he tried to teach me to do a backflip on the beach one day, because he started in the circus. Lancaster was a circus performer. That's how he developed. So it was fascinating to watch him. I think, personally, I learned quite a lot from him in terms of how he approached the camera. It's kind of hard to describe, in a way who he would play into the shot, into the frame of the shot at the time. I was very conscious of how his technique, if you like. So that was very, very interesting. And he was great. He was just terrific to have around. It was brilliant.
I think also, and it's fascinating, it is extraordinary, the different registers of comedy in there, because he has the whole story with the analyst is actually a much more comedic tone, I guess, than the rest of the movie. And it's almost like he was playing in 2 quite different registers, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, because it isn't a slightly different level, that comedy. It's very obvious, isn't it? And the guy who played the therapist, it's almost like a kind of Bob Newhart sketch or something. It's a slightly different arena. So there was definitely another level there. They must have had to be quite careful with, Am I going to give this to you?
No. I had a thought in my head and I can't think what it was.
Sorry.
No, back to you.
Okay.
All right, fine.
If it comes back, let us know.
Oh, yes, I know what the thought
she's
was.
got it now.
You're talking about comedy. I mean, you go from that extreme, which is the almost slapstick, down to, was it Claire Groden? With Grogan, who was in Gregor's Girl with John Gordon Sinclair, who I still adore and love and have worked with many times. And she's got that wonderful throwaway line, well, it's different.
But it's a great thing about the film. There are moments that do just work as perfect sketches, like that one line, whose baby?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And then there's just that little look around. And then this huge, wonderful laugh from all of you. Yeah. It's just a perfect entire sketch.
And I wonder if he maybe, I can't remember if that was the original script or not, that line. He may well have thrown that in. I remember there was Jennifer Black, who played Stella, my wife, had a line to Riegert, what lovely long eyelashes you've got. And in fact, Bill heard her say that to Peter Riegert one day on the set, so he stuffed it into the script. He just stuck it in there. And he would do that, he was very, loose, if you like. Yeah.
We should also talk about. I mean, obviously, Ian Smith and David Puttnam were very much on set, and they're very much creative producers. They're not, standing in the background just doing the money. What was their involvement day to day in the making of the film?
I mean, apart from making sure that we watched the derby. They were wonderful. David is I believe a great film can only be made because it comes down from the top. So to spot the screenplay that Bill had written and to make sure that he directed it was, of course, inspired. And then to allow him to cast it how he wanted. I'm assuming they allowed him to cast it how he wanted, because I was certainly unknown, therefore a danger,
Well, you'd done, I guess, The Woman in White.
I
So
had,
you'd had,
yes.
sort of quite a big lead at the point
I was a little
when...
name, but in movies I was unknown. And everything in this film works because of the casting and Scotland. And that's it. You get a great director and you let him loose with a cast of people who are correctly cast. And the total and absolute inspiration, final inspiration, is the soundtrack. Mark Knopfler. Who would think of doing asking Mark Knopfler to write music? But isn't it the most amazing soundtrack? And it lives with you, and it's evocative, and it just adds. Some soundtracks overtake. This one adds. It's extraordinary.
I was fortunate enough, because it was recorded in Primrose Hill, that soundtrack, and I sat in on some of that, the recording, and it was fascinating to see Knopfler's. He was a real perfectionist. The detail he would go into in recording was fantastic. I think my only dodgy day on the whole shoot was with Knopfler, because I had to play the accordion, and so I learned this tune. So I could play this tune on the accordion, and then about 2 days before we were due to shoot, he changed the tune. And I came in for this band call to rehearse with the band, who were musicians, a couple of his own band, a couple of Dire Straits guys, and then some local Highland musicians and stuff. And he could not understand why I couldn't play this tune, because it was a tune. Why can't you? So that was my only tricky day. But the soundtrack is just stunning. Yeah, yeah, it was stunning. Yeah.